voor uw aanwezigheid. Wij stellen zeer op prijs dat u hier bent. Dames en heren, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, we will start in 5 minutes. We beginnen over 5 minuten. Empezamos en 5 minutos. Muy buenos días. Gracias. En 5 minutos empezamos. We're on. Please take your seats. Good morning, everybody. Please take your seats. We're going to...
Buenos días a todos. Vamos a empezar.
Buenos días a todos. Por favor, toma asiento. Vamos.
Good morning, everyone. Let's get this event started. Thank you very much.
Translation. We have translation from English into Spanish and from Spanish into English. There are headsets that we have in the back of the room or that we'll hand out later. Javier Tebas will be speaking in Spanish later, so if you want to listen to his presentation or his talk in English, you will need the headset for the translation. The rest of the event will be in English. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here in Brussels. My name is Joris Evers. I'm the head of global communications for LaLiga. And in the name of Sport and Citizenship and LaLiga, we want to thank you first and foremost for being here with us, both online and here in Brussels in the room. We're going to be talking this morning about the importance of defending the European football ecosystem and tradition. This continues to be a very important topic, and it continues to be something we need to keep front of mind. We cannot have back of mind, and we cannot be complacent about, even if an opinion of the Advocate General of the European Court of Justice in many headlines is seen as something that may put this in people's back of minds. It should not be. It should be continuing to be front of mind. And this is why we are here. Having said that, we'll start with a video introduction by Tomasz Rankowski, a member of European Parliament, who's been graceful enough to give us a welcome message. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here in person today due to other obligations, but he sent us this message in video.
Dear President Tebas, dear guests, dear friends of sport, thank you for inviting me to open the event on defending the European football ecosystem and tradition. I would like to be with you now, but unfortunately, my obligations in Poland have prevented me from joining you. We all love football here and want the best for it. And we all know that European football is under one of the biggest threats it has been in a generation. As a former professional footballer and now as an MEP, I consider the European Superleague to be a direct threat to the European football pyramid. Because if you allow an elite to break away from the rest, the whole pyramid and system will collapse. We will be left with a commercial entertainment and profit-driven model in men's elite club football. This is not what we want. The reasons have been made clear so many times by all of the EU institutions and, more importantly, by fans, leagues, national associations, players and coaches. Our joint conclusions are clear. The organization of sport in Europe is based on solidarity and redistribution, with open competitions and sporting merit. During the proceedings at the European Court of Justice, many member states strongly supported this. The European Parliament's resolution of 23 November 2021, adopted by almost unanimity, of which I had the honor of being the rapporteur, underlined our institution's opposition to any breakaway competition in European football. The ongoing court case has a demerit of fueling the debate about the future of sport in Europe. However, I sincerely hope that this case can set in stone the European sports model and put a stop to the attempts of any breakaway competition. Of course, football is not working perfectly and must keep improving. We can do better. This is why I commend you all for coming together to discuss these key matters today, and I already look forward to hearing about your concrete plans for the future. The European Parliament, through its sport group, of which I am co-chair, will ensure that the EU contributes to this process. Our resolution already contains specific recommendations and solutions in this regard. Dear friends, I wish you a successful debate today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, thank you, Mr. Frankowski. We will be hearing in person now from our first panel. One thing I want to make you aware of, if you want to ask a question during this event, we ask you to send your question to us via a WhatsApp message. There is a piece of paper for if you are in this room. There's a piece of paper in front of you that contains the agenda for today, as well as the WhatsApp number. So you can send your question to that WhatsApp number, and then after each panel, we will relay the questions we can to the panelists. If you're online, you will have been sent the WhatsApp number via email this morning, so you can send your questions also via WhatsApp to that same number. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome on stage the first panel on the economic and legal impact of the breakaway competition. So the moderator is sports journalist Aster from 11 Sports and Sportza. And we have three panelists, Jean-François Brocard, Charles van der Burg, and Mark Watson. I guess I'm going to be one of the few people that's going to be able to pronounce Charles' name correctly, but I think Aster is going to be able to do it as
Hopefully,
well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Charles was going to be here in person, but he fell ill, so he's participating remotely, mostly because he didn't want to risk infecting anybody here. So thank you, Charles, for participating remotely and being part of the event still. Aster.
Thank you very much, Joris, and a very good morning from me as well. Of course, welcome to the beautiful Renaissance Hotel right in the heart of Brussels, and welcome to everyone joining us online, remotely as well, of course. The first panel is about the economic and legal impact of a potential breakaway competition. I think when the news broke of a Super League, of a potential breakaway competition in April 2021, many football fans all around the world were shocked. Most of us were surprised. And I think most people felt that something didn't feel right. Well, here this morning in this panel, we're going to take a look on an academic level at the economic and legal repercussions of such a breakaway competition, what the consequences might be for domestic football, for European football in general, from a grassroots level up until an elite level. And I'm very glad to say that I'm joined by actual experts. So I'm very interested to say what they will be saying. The first expert I would like to welcome on stage is an associate professor and economist at the Center for Law and Economics of Sports, Jean-François Brocard. Enchanté, Jean-François. Secondly, joining us online is a sports economist at the University of Twente, Charles van der Burg. So I hope the connection is there. Charles will be with us soon. Everything works, top. And last but very much not least, because he is my boss, the group CEO and co-founder of 11 Sports, Mark Watson. Hi, Mark. But Jean-François, I'm going to start off with you. Jean-François, you have published recently both on closed sports competitions in Europe and the European sports model. Can you tell us a little bit more about your findings and share your conclusions with us?
Of course, Aster. Thank you very much first for your invitation. I'm really happy to talk about this topic, which is very important to sport. Indeed, we conducted two studies in last years, one for the French Ministry of Sports, the other one for the Olympic Committee in France, sorry. Yeah, those studies were not focusing on football, and they were not focusing on the European Super League that we're going to talk about. And actually, that's one of the first comments I'd like to make. If this project, the Super League project, thanks to the soundbox that football offered, was raised comments from Emmanuel Macron in France, from Vice President of the European Commission, from Boris Johnson in the UK. Those comments were made after we talked about the Super League project. But those projects, breakaway leagues, rogue clubs organizing competitions pre-existed. They pre-existed, for example, in basketball. We have basketball people in the room today. And we have actors like commercial private companies running competitions such as the EuroLeague and the Eurocup that already are competing against federal competitions. So my first comment is going to be that what we're going to talk about today is wider than football. It's a matter for the sport in general, not only football. So then we have the example of EuroLeague as a closed league, breakaway league, but there are other sports where we can see that there's closed leagues. There's the ice hockey competition in Eastern Europe, the KHL, swimming, other individual sports have closed leagues such as swimming, such as ice skating, etc., etc. And one of our conclusions in the study was that clubs that compete in those competitions, as well as most organizers of such competitions, don't make money. Those businesses are not profitable so far. So the conclusion is that importing the North American closed leagues models does not mean that you import the profitability. That's a mistake. That's a dream. But so far, there's no proof that you can make money in Europe when you close the leagues. The Champions League, organized by UEFA, is at the top of the pyramid of competitions in football in Europe. But this pyramidal system is one of the pillars of the European sports model, the so-called European sports model. And what we proved in our studies is that this model should be defended because sports, among economic goods, is peculiar, has a peculiar nature. Sports should be indeed considered as a public good. In a nutshell, that means that the impact of sports, the social impact of sports, cannot be monetized. It's very difficult to estimate the impact of sports on health, on socialization, on citizenship, etc., etc. And what the economic theory says in this case is that if you ask a private, profit-orientated actor to organize sports, to produce sports, the outcome is going to be an under-production of sports because those actors are going to focus only on profitable aspects of sports. And what we like about sport in Europe are principles. We are really supporting principles such as solidarity, such as integrity of the game, such as the territorial grid of sports, the coverage of clubs all over the countries in Europe, the talent development. And those words are hardly pronounced in the mouth of ESL advocates, and for good reasons, because that's not their motto. They're profit-orientated. So they're never going to focus on what we like in the European sports model. And then my last comment is going to be that this project that we're going to talk about today, the ESL, is very, incomplete, to say the least. The amateur nature of their initial communication was amazing for an academic. There's nothing about the format competition. They say nothing about the regulation, for example. When they always talk about the NBA, about the North American leagues, but those closed leagues are profitable thanks to very strict regulation on the talent market, on the revenue sharing market, etc., etc. And as long as we're not going to be able to talk about a project that is a little bit more detailed, I cannot understand that anybody can be convinced about such projects.
Jean-François, that sounds very interesting. I want to dive deeper into it, and we will in due course. But first, I'm going to introduce Challa into the conversation. Challa, wherever you are in the world, because I can't see you, but hopefully you can hear me. You have looked more specifically at the legal aspects and published recently as well on the opinion of the Advocate General of the European Court of Justice. You also got he also has an upcoming publication on the legal topic as well. Can you tell us a little bit more from your perspective, please?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for inviting me in. And I'm sorry I couldn't come to Brussels. I did research together with procurement professors in economics, Anno Spitz and Hanno Beck. And I'm also giving their results. Let me just start with the main conclusion. All types of a Super League and all threats of a Super League should be forbidden by the European authorities because they are incompatible with law. It's quite simple, but the point has partly been neglected by legal schools. The underlying argument concerns the consumer market. These are the markets where clubs compete for fans, so for stadium visitors, buyers of club merchandise, television viewers. In these markets, clubs compete for fans with other clubs in their own country. Ajax Amsterdam is not competing with Liverpool, it's competing with Feyenoord Rotterdam. And this means, and this is also a legal conclusion, the national market are relevant markets. Now, for economists, this is obvious, but I think legal scholars focusing on European law have neglected the national consumer markets too much. Once you do not do so, the legal situation changes fundamentally. And I can only give the main idea here, and I should refer to the publications of Alois Prinsen, Beck, and me. Let us first neglect to introduce the Super League for a moment and look at consumer markets in general. Look at a Dutch child that considers becoming fan of a club for the remainder of his life. What does the child want? Well, most Dutch children want to be fan of a Dutch club that can win important prizes. 50 years ago, Dutch children had a lot of choice. There were at least 3 Dutch clubs that had a serious chance of winning the top European title someday. Feyenoord Rotterdam, my club, was the first to do it in 1970, the European Cup won. Ajax won it the next 3 years, and PSV Eindhoven was a bit late, but they did so in 1988. So children, consumers, had much choice. There was much competition on the consumer markets. At present, fully different. Ajax is basically the only Dutch club that still has a chance to win the Champions League. You may remember they were close in 2019 when they lost the semi-finals in the very last minute. Ajax also wins most Dutch titles nowadays. So at present, many Dutch children become fan of Ajax, simply the best club. So Ajax is getting a larger market share on the Dutch consumer market, and this means that competition is decreasing. Now, there are many reasons for this development. Most of them are unrelated to the Super League, but I just give you the main picture. Now we can come to the Super League and consider to begin with a 20-club Super League which is closed. Quite more or less similar to the model presented in 2021. There will be one participant from the Netherlands only, Ajax Amsterdam. The competition is closed, so Ajax will get a monopoly on the Dutch market for top-level football. This is the business model of the Champions League, providing the participants with market power in their own country. The business model of a of a Super League is basically anti-competitive by nature. They want to gain market power in their own countries, and so they can charge higher prices and so on. Now, it's quite simple legally. Article 101 of the treaty says that agreements between undertakings which reduce competition are not allowed. A Super League must be based on an agreement between clubs. As I argued, it reduces competition in the Dutch market, it will do so in other countries too. So a closed Super League simply is illegal. I do not discuss whether or not Advocate Ranters has taken account of this. He doesn't use the word consumer markets against the closed league. But the same arguments hold for an open Super League of 20 clubs. In such a competition, Ajax will be a club in the Super League like Tottenham is a club in the Premier League. It will nearly always play there. Feyenoord Rotterdam will be comparable to Bournemouth. It will play there a few years perhaps if they are lucky. But most years they will play in lower competitions. And when they play in the Super League, they will not win it. That still means that Ajax will be dominating the Dutch consumer market. It will gain more power, market power because of the Super League. And so that's also illegal. And more generally, we have argued, I cannot give all arguments to that all Super Leagues and all threats of a Super League are obviously illegal. Just look at consumer markets for a change. What does this mean? Well, the European legal authorities, or the European Commission, and perhaps the court, should forbid both all threats of a Super League and all Super Leagues. What will be the practical consequences? The power of the big clubs within UEFA will decrease. Therefore, we will get more measures to improve competitive balance, a more equal distribution of television revenues, for instance. This is what the small clubs want. This is what democratic decision-making within UEFA will lead to if there are no longer the threats of the big clubs. And if we have more competitive balance, it is clear, we've also shown this in the article, that the present system is generating more welfare, a higher willingness to pay. I agree with Jean-François to a large extent. And it will simply give more pressure to the fans. So following the law, this is where we should aim at. And thank you for listening.
Is this thing on? Yes, it's on. Thank you very much, Challe. Thank you for painting the legal picture. A potential breakaway competition is illegal by nature. I think that's the gist of it. Mark, from the perspective of a broadcaster, of course, as group CEO and co-founder of 11 Sports, airing football in various countries, what is your take on the current ecosystem of European football?
Thank you, Esther. Well, look, good morning, everyone, by the way, bon dia. Let me start by telling you a little bit, very briefly, about 11 Sports. As you said, 11 Sports was founded in 2015. We are a broadcasting and streaming company focused exclusively on sport, and today we operate services across Europe, in Asia, and in North and South America. This year, in 2023, we will stream up to 100,000 football games around the world. We're one of the biggest streamers of football in the world. And our content will generate somewhere around 70 million views on social media around the world. Some of you may also know we are becoming part of the DAZN group. We've just been acquired by DAZN, and that means we will be part of the biggest sports broadcasting group in Europe and one of the biggest groups in the world. So that's 11 Sport. Let's talk about these issues just for a moment. I should say I'm a commercial person. I'm a broadcaster. I'm not a politician. I don't have a particularly political view. I have personal views, but I don't have a political view of the issues that we're talking about today. But I do have some commercial views. There's so much that we could say. There's so many things to say about this topic. Let me start by making one basic point, which is about value. So, as probably all of you know, sports is a very valuable property in the media sector. It's the most valuable property in the media sector. That is because it is able to drive consumer behavior. It can drive consumers to switch platforms from one cable operator to another. It can drive consumers to go to the pub or a bar, even in the pouring rain that we have in Brussels today, to watch a football match. And of course, it can drive consumers to their sofa in their front room, in the lounge of their house, to watch a live game at a particular hour of a particular day, and it can make a lot of people do that at the same time. That means the values are high. But the values are not infinite. The value is capped. And the value of sports rights essentially is capped by the willingness and the ability of consumers to pay for it, especially in Europe, which is essentially a pay TV market. Some other parts of the world where there are bigger audiences, there are some other economic models. America, for example, driven a lot by advertising. But in Europe, it's a pay TV model. So there is a cap to that value. And what that means is that although that value can grow over time, there isn't some great pot of money that is sitting there in the market waiting to be allocated to a new format that happens to come along. It simply isn't there. So, I'm a broadcaster. I take a commercial view of things. If a new compelling format comes into the market, we will look at it. And if a media company decides to buy it and allocate revenues to it, that has a very binary effect. It means there's less money for other sports properties. So if one property is taking money out of the market, others will get less. And in this case, that means that the current ecosystem of leagues and federations and clubs would, in this scenario, get less. That pot can be grown. There are many ways, compelling ways actually, to grow that pot. I'm not sure that a European Super League is the way to do it. Just to give other people a turn, I'm happy to come back to some of those ways in which I think value can be grown over time. But I'll just pause there for a minute and let you maybe ask some questions, but we can come back to that.
Okay, okay. Teasing us then, Mark. Thank you. Jean-François, as you mentioned, I think one of the most interesting things you said, Jean-François, you mentioned that in other sports such as basketball, I think you mentioned ice hockey as well, there is already a sort of super-like format. It's not profitable, you already mentioned, but what can we learn from these formats?
There are basketball people in the room. I know that there's been a lot of discussions, to say the least, between federal movements and those actors. And actually, the European judges have been contacted, but the decisions takes a lot of time. So EuroLeague is still running. And what we see in France is that there's a big problem, for example, with the calendars, because those private actors don't care about the other competitions. So the national selections don't play their best players because those private companies wouldn't let the players go and play with the national team, so that's a problem. They don't work on talent development. So what's very bad for basketball at the moment is that the grassroots gets thinner and thinner. They don't share revenues with anybody. So all their behavior doesn't convince us that that's a good way to develop football tomorrow.
I think you mentioned earlier that you were talking about the European sports model. Yeah, does it exist? Or in what way does it exist? Because there's many people that don't believe that there is such a thing as a European sports model. So does it exist? In what way?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because of course the European sports model is so heterogeneous. When you look into some sports are not organized like the others. In some countries it's not organized like in other countries. But still there are some common pillars. And what I talked about, the monopoly of federations, the solidarity, the training development, the grid of sports supply is very important. And that's some common things that are observed in Europe. So even if the sports model has limits, difficulties, and we're going to talk about it later for sure, it can be improved, and the institutions that are in the room know that if they want to be defended by the judges here in Brussels, in Luxembourg, they need to do more to prove that they believe in this model, in the principle of this model, the solidarity, the integrity, the generalization of the supply of sport, etc., etc. They need to do more. They do a lot. UEFA, CIO, they already redistribute more than 90% of their revenues. But maybe they should communicate a little bit more as well. But the European sports model, it has limits, but still, I think it's a good base. and all the alternatives to this model are really worse. You know? So let's develop, let's improve this model, and then we're going to have our kids have a good practice of sport.
Yeah. And what do you think should be improved then?
I think the communication for sure. Some actors should do more in solidarity, for example. But what Charlie said was very important. UEFA, for the last 20 years, is under pressure from big clubs to do more, to do less about solidarity and about integrity, financial integrity, do less about this. So the pressure from those clubs mitigates the efforts of UEFA, for example, in developing and in saving this model. So what they can do better is to respect the principles that I mentioned earlier, but the thing is the pressure from big actors is too strong. And Charles is saying, and that's his words, that those threats should be made illegal.
Yeah. And that brings us to Charlotte. Let's get back to you. Charlotte's still joining us remotely, of course, from the Netherlands. Understanding, Charlotte, that reserving football for the elite and making the rich even richer is not the right path. What framework do you think should exist for football?
Well, I think the present framework is simply best. This is what I wrote together with these German professors. The only problem is that the present system is getting worse because competitive balance is decreasing. The Dutch competition is becoming less interesting because Ajax mostly wins the championship. So what we should do is to restore the competitive balance in the present system by a better distribution of the revenues. And that requires that we curtail the power of the big clubs. Once we do that, we get a great system again.
And that requires courage as well, of course. If you take a look at the legal aspects, I think you highlighted in your upcoming paper, I've got it written down here, that there should be additional protections for football to nourish the grassroots level. That's something that you mentioned as well, some of the negative points about a Super League model. To help smaller clubs and leagues, of course, instead of always carving out more for the big clubs. But what is your suggestion, Charles?
Well, for the Super League, I have no suggestion because the system isn't improving welfare. Of course, they will say to the judge that they will distribute some money to the grassroots, but this will be a relatively small amount. If you restore competitive balance in the present league and really have a serious redistribution of money, it works much better. And there are possibilities. It's not only about revenue distribution. Together with Alois Pins, I wrote an article saying we are in favor of a progressive social levy. So Real Madrid pays a lot of money. It's not going to the government, but Real Madrid should use it for social projects. Football clubs are excellent in it, preventing drugs addiction. Players do that with children, it's great. So, and Real Madrid should have a significant amount of money for doing that. And also helping grassroots activities close to Madrid. Now, if, say, for instance, these revenues would constitute 50% of the expenditures of Real Madrid, that would help grassroots sports enormously. At the same time, my club, Feyenoord, is much smaller, so they would have to pay only 10% to grassroots activities. So they have more money for the team and they have a better chance to beat Real Madrid. So we get nicer football, think all people like Jean-François who have advocated the European sports model can say this has been a victory. But I'm not sure that the same conclusion will hold for an open Super League. And therefore, the European Court of Justice in the future should also take account of what happens at national consumer markets. Because in our view, these are the core from a legal perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Chala. Mark, can I get back to you?
Please.
What is the importance of scarcity of football matches, of big games between the biggest clubs in the world for television? Because I think it was the president of the Super League of Real Madrid, sorry, who said that his club didn't play Chelsea for 65 years. I think it had been a while that they played each other, and he uses that as an argument to say that makes football boring. We need to play each other way more to make the product interesting. Is that true?
Well, look, big games are very important. There's no question about that. When I launched BT Sport for British Telecom about 10 years ago in the UK, we launched with a relatively small number of games, but some of those were the biggest domestic games, and they were capable of really driving consumer behaviour. In other words, they allowed us to acquire and retain a lot of customers. So big games are important, but big domestic games are also very, very important. Probably the most important, actually, of all. If you come to the UK, my market, or any of the markets around Europe, from a broadcaster point of view, really it's the very big domestic competitions and matches which tend to be the most important and tend to drive the most value. You know, we are investors at 11 Sports in the current ecosystem. We're proud to be the home of Belgian football here in Belgium. We're proud to be the home of LaLiga here in Belgium and in many other markets as well. And we can see actually here in Belgium just how important the local league is. Of course, it's the biggest media property here in the country, but also how important it is to have a ladder up into Europe for Belgium clubs. Important in terms of the audience and the consumer fan base, and important economically. I did talk a little bit about ways in which we might grow values. I might do that now if I've got a moment. As I say, we are investors in the current ecosystem. We do believe in it, and we'll continue to invest in it. But it's not perfect. There are ways in which it can be improved and optimized at the European level and at the domestic level. Some of it is on our side, on the broadcaster side of the fence. If you look at the transmission of live games over the last couple of decades, it's improved. The experience, no doubt, is improved in 2022 compared to what it was in 2002. But it hasn't been revolutionized. It's not dramatically different. And really, we haven't yet taken advantage, I think, of the power of the internet to really innovate the customer experience. And there's a great opportunity to do that, to create a sports platform that offers everything that fans need, that really engages them and gives consumers the opportunity to take more services and spend more money and bring more money into the system. And I think that's on our side, and it's one of the reasons why 11 is merging with the DAZN group to do that. So that's on our side. There are other things to be done. Let me give you a couple of specific examples. Here in Belgium, the opportunity to monetize the distribution of sport into commercial premises. So last night I was in a bar, 11 Sports was playing. There were about, on the TV screens, there were probably 100 people in the bar, I guess. But that bar was paying, if it was paying at all, may not have been paying, but if it was paying at all, it was paying the same as one person sitting at home. Now that's not economically rational, and it's not fair, and there's a huge opportunity to grow a market there. Hand in hand with those bars, we can give them more value because live sport brings in customers, and they can sell more food and more drinks. And in other markets, that's a great source of value. So that's one example. Let me give you another example. In the UK, you can't watch live football on a Saturday afternoon. This seems to me a slightly antiquated situation, and something I've spoken about before. That will have some impact on the value of the Premier League, the premier competition in the UK. Probably has a disproportionate impact on the value of the smaller leagues and smaller clubs, because as a result of it, most games of the smaller clubs are not broadcast at all. Of course, that is going to affect value. The other thing it does, and maybe this is the big point that I would make on value, is it doesn't kill demand. There's still demand on a Saturday afternoon to watch those games. So where do people go to watch those games? They go to pirate websites and pirate services, so illegal services to watch those games. And that's really my big point, I guess. Rather than focusing on creating a new Super League, this is where I think the focus of football really should be. It should be on combating piracy. Piracy is the existential threat and also the great commercial opportunity of our time. Estimates vary, but around 30 to 40% of consumers, we think, are watching live football via illegal sites. That's an enormous amount of value that is leaking out of the system. And although some leagues, and LaLiga is at the front of this, are doing a lot to combat piracy, more needs to be done. More needs to be done by clubs and teams in particular with their local communities, encouraging their fans to consume content legally, because many fans don't really realize that an IP box that they're not paying for is actually illegal and is actually damaging their own club and damaging the team that they really love. So they can do more, but more than anything, in my view, governments, and here in Brussels, the EU, need to be doing more to criminalize this behavior and on enforcement to bring people into the system. And that will do more than anything to grow the pot of value. And I'll just give you a very small example. In Italy, very recently, the authorities have started to take quite serious action on piracy. They've been raiding criminal gangs. Not only have they found literally lorry loads of cash, and that is money that should be coming into the ecosystem of football, of the current ecosystem of football, but is going out to criminal gangs instead. Not only that, people were arrested and put in prison, but we saw an immediate increase in subscriptions and revenues, immediate. So value went up, and that will continue. And that's, if I have a big point to make, is probably that one.
I think that's very interesting, because I think a big piracy website went down recently as well worldwide. And I think there was a raid in the UK as well last week, I read online, with many people arrested. Yeah, so that's something that we have to do. I'd really love to elaborate on all of this, but I think we have a program and a time schedule. So I'm going to bring in Joris. Because you have some questions, you might have some questions for these three.
I got one question sent along. As a reminder, if you would like to ask a question to this panel or to the subsequent panels, please send a message to the WhatsApp number on the back of the agenda that's on the table in the room, or to the number that you've been sent in an email if you're following us online. Thank you very much for the conversation. It's been very interesting, several headlines for me for sure. We got one question from Christophe Le Petit, the head of economic studies from the Center of Law and Economics for Sport, and the question is for Mark Watson. You explained that the money pot will not increase, and that if tomorrow a new competition appears, you would look at it. Why and what would be the arguments to continue to broadcast the traditional competitions instead of a new Super League? Are some arguments in favor of the UCL against the Super League, or how do you see that?
Well, the reason why, thank you for the question, the reason why I think the pot doesn't necessarily agree is as I try to explain, it is capped by consumers' willingness and ability to pay. Consumers only have so much money to spend on football and other live sports and media in general, and they also have only so much time to allocate to it, and that creates a cap. Then and that cap in turn creates a defined pot of money, of value. That pot grows over time, and of course over the last few years it's been growing a lot, because for the reasons I explained, football is a very valuable commodity, the most valuable commodity in the media marketplace. So it will continue to grow. But it doesn't grow because you introduce a new competition. It doesn't grow because one club in one country starts playing another club in another country more often. And in fact, Asta, you asked me about this. There is a real value in scarcity in my view. One of the values that is generated by the Champions League is the fact that some of these big clubs don't play each other week in, week out, that when they do play, it is a big event. It's a special occasion. It's often a knockout event by that stage as well, and that creates a lot of value. And we see this as a broadcaster. We really see it on the ground in terms of the revenues that come into the business at that moment. So scarcity actually is a very important factor in driving value. So am I sitting here and saying that a new format, a Super League, would not take money? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I'm saying it wouldn't create an exponential amount of new money coming into the market, because actually, although it's not perfect, the current ecosystem is quite effective and consumers like it.
Great. Well, thank you very much for those conclusions. I think those are great, great points. Before letting you go, I wanted to mention one more thing. Is that Challe, who is online, has published actually yesterday evening a new article on some of the topics that he was talking about. It's published on the website lawinsport.com. So if you go to Law in Sport, you'll find a new publication by Challe focusing and going more in depth on some of the comments that he made about where he feels the ECJ should go in its final ruling, and the opportunity that it should take to shut the door for any kind of Super League and Super League-like competitions. With that, thank you very much, panelists. Thank you, Challe. Thank you, Jean-François. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Aster, for moderating. I really appreciate it. We're going to move on to our next panel, which includes various people from the world of football, also representing football supporters, and representing the world of basketball, which you've heard mentioned earlier as well. We have a moderator from our partner in this event, Sport and Citizenship. Laurent Thiel is going to be moderating this panel. And again, if you would like to ask a question, please send it to the WhatsApp number on the back of the piece of paper, or what you received an email. We are going to have 4 panelists and the moderator on stage, so we're going to do a quick reset here. The other reminder I'll give you, if you are in this room and you don't speak Spanish, but you would like to understand Javier Tebas, who is coming after this panel, please raise your hand and we'll bring you a headset so that you can have the simultaneous translation into English for when Javier comes up, Javier Tebas comes up and speaks in Spanish. It seems like nobody's raising their hand in need for, oh, there's one up front for a device. And with that, we'll move over to Laurent. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for being a partner in this event with us. I'll give you your panel.
Thank you, Joris. Es un placer, presidente, para nosotros un honor organizar.
A pleasure and an honor to share the organization of this event on a very important subject related to the future of football. Thank you very much for you allowing us to organize this event together.
Different speakers, panelists we have. First, Alex Mougeot, Président de l'Union Saint-Gilloise. Alex, hello, welcome to the stage. It's a big honor to welcome you, and thank you very much for the football you provide in Brussels every Sunday afternoon or Saturday evenings. Great football, very generous. Thank you for you boys. Second, Jaroslav Dolezal from Czech Republic Club, Vice President of the football club of Jablonek. Good to see you. Welcome. Then a representative from Football Supporters Europe. I call Stuart Dykes. Please join us on the stage, Stuart. And finally, a basketball player Thomas van der Spiegel, who is the president of the Union of European Leagues of Basketball. Welcome. Take place. Hello. So thank you, gentlemen, for participating in this panel. I will give the floor first to Alex. Alex, you are leading a club bringing the symbol of what is written on this word tradition. Tradition, you are the symbol of tradition. Can you explain the story of your club and how did you manage increasing and increasing? You are the symbol of the asset of this pyramid system, projecting you in the future in the European competition after coming back to the elite of the Belgian football. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you for that introduction. It's very kind. We started in 2018 at the club, and it started at the bottom of the second division. I was looking back on my phone the other day to think about this panel, and there's a picture of me with my son, who was a year old, on my lap watching a relegation fight in the second division of Belgium, making sure that we stayed up at that point. And it's been an amazing adventure since, and obviously a huge part of the investment in the club and the hopes for the club at the very start was European competition. And without that pyramid that's in place, founded on a meritocracy, that would never have really been possible. So it's everything to football in Europe that everyone has a chance. That's what every supporter dreams about. That's what everyone talks about. That's what everyone wants. So anything that would change that, anything that would lock people out, it's not something that seems logical to anyone. I speak not only as a president of a football club, but as a supporter of football.
And how do you make possible the dream for your fans? Because they are very important. The fans, when we come to your stadium, the atmosphere is really great, and we see these people hoping a better future for the club. How do you provide this dream for the supporters, for the fans?
Well, we just have to keep working hard and improve the club. And at the moment, that means, we're trying to win the title this season. We're trying to win the cup. We're playing tonight, and we're still in the Europa League. One of Manchester United and Barcelona will be lucky enough to get through and have the chance to play us. So good for them. Yeah.
What is the amount of your budget for the?
So we have quite a bonus-heavy structure, but if we were to come mid-table, we'd have a budget of somewhere around 14 million euros. But last season, doing as well as we did, it rose up significantly to high teens, 20 million.
Thank you. Jaroslav, did you play ever against Union Saint-Gilloise?
No, unfortunately not.
So can you explain to us the special structure organization of the Czech Republic football? Where do you put your club and your ambition for the future of your club within this competition and within European? Are you qualified for the next European competition this year?
Very good morning, everyone. Special thanks to the organizers for being able to be here. First of all, I would like to introduce the club a little. Jablonec is a traditional club that was founded in 1945, and for the past almost 30 years we have had the pleasure to be in the first division in the Czech Republic. I have been a part of the club for the past 7 years, which have been really special 7 years for the club because we have made it 2 times to the group stages of the European club competitions. Concerning the size of the club, we are, let's say, a mid-sized club in terms of the Czech Republic, but considering it from the European perspective, Jablonec is a very small club, very tiny club in the heart of Europe, and therefore I would like to point out again that it's very special for such a small club to be able to join the European family of clubs in the UEFA club competitions.
How can you explain the importance of the current model for football for you? It's an opportunity, a potentiality to increase your result, to increase your budget?
Well, it has already been discussed here several times that there is a big financial impact on the clubs, because for a club like Jablonec, just the participation in the group stage itself brings approximately 80% of the annual budget. So it's a significant financial improvement for the club. But it's not only about the money, of course. It brings, well, attractivity. First, attractivity of the club for the sponsors, and then also attractivity of the club for the players. Also attractivity of our players for other clubs, because normally Jablonec is mostly alive because of football transfers. So we are then able to transfer our players elsewhere for much higher amounts.
Thank you. Now let's have the say of the supporters, the fans of football. Stuart, can you explain to you what is your organization you are representing today, and how do you see the perspective of the evolution of this football model? Yes. Does it work? So I'll take another one.
That's working now. Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Stuart Dykes. I'm Director of European and Institutional Affairs at Football Supporters Europe. Football Supporters Europe, or FSE for short, is since 1st of October 2022 is the sole representative body of European football fans. Until 1st of October, there were 2 organizations representing supporters at European level. The second one was Supporters Direct Europe, an organization that I worked for from 2010. But in the summer of last year, the members of both organizations voted in favor of a merger. I think it was confusing for many of the stakeholders as to why there were two separate organisations and bodies representing football supporters in Europe. And on 1st of October, we merged our operations to form one unified body representing football supporters in Europe. We are recognised by UEFA and the other stakeholders. As such, we have members in over 50 European countries, including in most countries the main supporter organisations, the national supporter organisations in those countries.
Yeah, Stuart, can you comment, in your opinion, about the current efforts of A22 sport organization to promote their view? Is it a danger for you? How can you evaluate this ambition they have?
I don't know if I would call it a danger. I mean, we've all received the emails and the letters and all the rest of it, and I think it's clear nobody should be fooled, and certainly we're not fooled by the efforts of A22 to now try to paint the attempted launch of the Superleague as something that was now going to be done in the interests of the game, and there will be financial redistribution, etc., etc. As I said, we're not taken in by the arguments. A lot of the things that they have, or the points that they have made, we may not disagree with them. In fact, we probably agree with them in some of the issues. But to that extent, the concept of the Super League is a distraction, and since it was launched abortedly, and we all know the role that football supporters played in helping to defeat that. But since that attempted launch, we've not been having the kind of conversations that we at FSC think we need to be having. We still need to be talking more about competitive balance, about financial redistribution, about the social value of sport and the specific nature of sport. And a lot of the speakers that we've heard already so far this morning have made all these points, that we have the model, they call it the European model of sports, if you will, and it's not perfect, and we still have a lot of work to do on reforming the existing system. We're not having that conversation because of this unwanted threat. As far as we are concerned, I mean, in our membership, I'm not aware of any single organisation or any serious supporter representative who would even begin to entertain the idea of a European Super League. No one's in favour of it, and I think the whole of the football family, we may be dysfunctional at times, we may not always agree with each other, but I think you can see in the case of the Super League, the football family has come together as one. As I say, we reject it entirely, unanimously. We don't want anything to do with it. It's not in the interest of fans. It will have a harmful impact on the domestic leagues, which is the bread and butter. They are the bread and butter competitions for football fans. So we would like to see the end of this threat once and for all. We welcome the opinion of the Advocate General Rantos and everything that was said there. And we want to get back to discussing the issues that are really important to us and how we can make the game better. And that also includes the involvement of football fans in the decision-making processes. We've seen resolutions passed by the European Parliament, by the Council of the European Union, by the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, all calling for the involvement in football supporters in the governance structures of football and governing bodies. And these are the kind of conversations that we want to have. We want to see more, because we think supporters, as we saw in the role that they played in defeating the Super League, have a lot of important things to say and can make an important contribution as valued stakeholders along with all the others.
Can we move to the basketball case? Because very sorry, the Super League has been already created. Why? Why this creation? For which reason? There were a lack of competition somewhere in your...
Well, good morning and thanks for having me. There was also already some referrals made to the basketball case, of course, but maybe just to introduce my organization, ULEB is basically the basketball equivalent of European leagues. So we unite the biggest European professional basketball leagues in Europe, and it was mentioned by Jean-François earlier, but we have known a closed league which is called the EuroLeague for many years now. It was gradually closed off and has been completely closed off for the past years, and it's controlled by 11 of the biggest clubs in Europe who own 70+% of the shares and have a syndication agreement in place which allows them...
You belong to the organization. Your organization belongs to the...
Well, we are still the biggest individual shareholder of the EuroLeague, but because of the syndication agreement, we have nothing to say. We have no representation whatsoever. And we are competing with this Superleague for many years now, and it's killing our national leagues. It's not a way to go. It's killing grassroots. It discourages investments, and that's why we filed a complaint in 2020 as ULEB against ECA, which is the body that controls EuroLeague. And it was let's say, our joy to see that the opinion of the Advocate General, which was released in December, was exactly the points that we made and the conclusions that we came to when we filed our complaint back in 2020. We've seen that we have to compete with EuroLeague when it comes to commercial exploitation, because we fight for the same slice of the cake. A fan doesn't buy 100 tickets a year. A fan chooses games. A fan watches a limited number of games every year. So we lost media rights deals at the domestic level. We lost ticketing revenues. We lost sponsorship to them, and because of the fact that they are active in both leagues. So they played EuroLeague, but they're still active at the domestic level. It's very hard to compete with them because their value proposition today is better and it's anti-competitive.
Yeah. Would you say that the economic cake of basketball get bigger or no?
No, the cake, and I was happy to hear Mark say his views, because the cake hasn't gotten bigger. The big clubs just got a bigger slice of the cake, and I think that's a big concern. We've seen some major potential investments into the sport, into the grassroots, but also into the domestic leagues that haven't gone through because of the fact that if somebody wants to invest, whether it's institutional money, whether it's private money, you want to be able to have access to the highest tier competition, and today it's closed off. So it's really an issue today that we are trying to fight, and I'm here today as well, and that's why I'm grateful to be here today as well. But I'm here also today to make the case that this doesn't work. It's not a way to go. It's not a way to follow, and I think we can all agree on that.
To President Alex and Jaroslav, do you think that it's an example to avoid at all costs for football, this example coming from basketball?
I wouldn't pretend to be an expert in basketball and the business of basketball, but at the same time, it seems fairly obvious to me, from everything Stuart said as well, that this is nothing that anyone wants. If anything, I feel, having been a football supporter for my whole life and having followed football business for a long time, the Super League was something that was threatened for a long time. You know, there were a lot of murmurings of, well, if we don't get more money from UEFA, this is the big boys, the biggest teams, then we're going to do something. And I think that we should actually, everyone in this room who supports what we're doing here today, should be quite grateful for the fact that they have done it in such a naked way, such a terrible proposition in every regard. It's not well thought through. It clearly, to me, looking at it and reading everything that they did, they were so obsessed with secrecy and with no one knowing about it, it led them to only talk to people who told them that everything they were doing was a good idea, because there's nothing that makes any sense. And as Stuart refers to, they've tried since to try and add various bits that they've heard, oh, this would be a good idea. But ultimately, I think everyone can see that when the original proposition came out, they were working on it for a long time. That is what they believed in. That is what they wanted it to be. And everything since is just trying to persuade, trying to cajole, trying to show anyone who's deciding legally that they're doing the things that they need. They're ticking boxes until the moment where if they were to get a yes, that everything would then go back to the way they originally had it.
Jaroslav, what do you think about the example of basketball? Do we have to avoid it for the football organization?
Well, I think that it's also worth mentioning that the UEFA club competitions do not only provide the matches between the clubs, but also some kind of interaction between them. And since there is this interaction, the clubs can let's say, learn from each other, not only in terms of the football itself, but also in terms of the administration, in terms of the organization, and so on. So, let's say the small clubs where the administration and management is more about, well, passion and enthusiasm, while with the big ones it is very much professional, very much about the professionalism and delivering the very best match every single week. It is important that there is this interaction between the clubs, and with only having the very biggest ones playing against each other, then this interaction is lost. Of course, there would still be some kind of solidarity redistribution of the money, but as I said before, for me it is not only about the money, because this interaction helps very much with improving the smaller clubs with their organization, with their match delivery, from the way that you learn that if you want your management to really look like a club, then you should have the unified uniforms, to the way that the match delivery can be done, and to the way that you can improve your stadium infrastructure. So from my point of view, the current system is very much better than the one where only the elite would be on the top and the other ones would be in the back.
Thomas, what is the opinion of the fans of the club playing the Superleague in basketball? Are they proud to play it? Is it an honor for them, or?
To be honest, everyone's confused because they play round robin, so they play many games. They to control these clubs, to control of the.
They play twice a week. Sometimes.
A lot of times they play twice a week. We managed for now to keep them away from the weekends, but they took Fridays lately, so they play on Fridays. So that means that you have scheduling problems as well. So they're step by step they're destroying the national leagues, and they are squeezing the national leagues into a corner that is very hard to get out of. So if a team plays on Friday, you can't schedule them for Saturday, and even Sunday is hard. So fans are confused. They don't know what's happening. They're happy sometimes to play the big clubs, but at the same time, the rivalries are still very much at a local level. The European fandom is very much at the local level still, so that they couldn't live without their derbies. And the thing is that now these clubs play nationally, and they play in the EuroLeague, and it's a model that can't be sustainable. As was mentioned earlier as well, these clubs are not releasing their players anymore for national team games. They really schedule games during the national team break. So the integrated model based on sporting merit, with open access, with room for national teams, with room for national leagues, and with room for European club football or basketball, is completely gone now, and it's completely disrupted.
Stuart, do you think that this American model, I call it the American model, is ready to be implemented in Europe? Or do you think that the European institution, your sports institution, will reject it at all?
I think that's a really difficult question. It's one we've studied at great length on the Mexico, for example. I think there are some aspects of the American sports model which are very good. The solidarity, the redistribution of income, etc. The draft system, in that the competitive balance aspect, in that it allows the worst team the first choice of the best players. But you know, and this is an American system. It's reliant on the commissioner and the clubs to accept the power of the commissioner to set the rules. And I don't think it's something you can just transplant from America to Europe and start to implement. It's like if you take 50+1 as an example, the system that we have in Germany of clubs being owned, or not even owned, but clubs being member run, and there's been considerations, would this model work in the UK, for example, and it's had to be, because for cultural reasons, it's just not simply possible to introduce a system like 50+1 in England. It wouldn't work for various historical and traditional reasons. But I think the general lessons that we can learn, I think there are lessons that we can learn on financial solidarity, and the redistribution of income within the current system for us is an essential point. Reference was made in the previous panel to I think it was called a professional social levy. So where the biggest, most successful and richest clubs would pay a certain fee, that would be redistributed to the grassroots. Well, the organisation that I used to work for, SD Europe, when we were in the discussions for the UEFA Convention, we raised this. We also made a similar suggestion, a social solidarity fund, where income or revenue from the European club competition should be redistributed into a pot to support community projects, local projects, education, culture projects, because this is about the specificity of sport. This is
the DNA of the sport, yeah.
In Article 165, and this is the special nature of sport, so I think we need to have these conversations and place more focus on the social value of football. We heard a lot about the commercial value of football, but we don't talk enough, in my view and our view, about the social value of football and the role it plays in local communities, which I think would be destroyed or at least damaged, heavily impacted by if a Super League were to be created.
The same question to the two presidents of the club. Are you satisfied by the way of how this revenue of income is redistributed to your clubs by UEFA, by your national structure? Jaroslav?
Well,
not enough.
I think that the current system has been evolving and developing for quite some time, so of course there's always time for evolution, but I'm deeply convinced that this evolution should never turn into revolution. So since I have learned during those matches around Europe that we are really one football family, and there's always room for discussion and room for involvement. So in case that anybody would be unhappy with the current system, there's always space for discussion, for raising a hand and saying, I would like this and that to change, but not the room to make a revolution and turn everything around.
Alex?
Well, first of all, I would agree with Stuart in terms of redistribution is not currently done in the best possible way, and there could be more. In terms of the comparison with American leagues, just to say that there's so many reasons why it's completely and utterly impossible. First of all, you talk about a draft system. Well, America's one country. So you have high schools, you have colleges, and then you draft players from that. It's not transplantable to Europe in any way, shape or form. Second of all, the big reason why the teams make a lot of money is because of grandfathered in collective bargaining agreements where the ownership gains a certain percentage of the revenue of the league and the players get a certain revenue percentage of the league. That would not be legally possible in Europe in any way. You can't stop people earning more money if they have the ability to. So those are two big reasons. But also in terms of clubs, there isn't an Austin Tigers NFL team in the second division that it's desperate to get promoted, but there's a closed league. They don't exist. It's the way the two systems have evolved is as a result of the feelings of the people, the feelings of the people involved in both continents, as it were. And look, I come back. I think that we can definitely redistribute the revenue better, but to me, any conversation about UEFA, about anything to do with that is quite whataboutism relative to the very facts of the Super League itself being
Alex,
only interesting for
Stuart raised twice the same question of social impact, social cohesion. Do you play a social role within your community in the city of Brussels, and you too in your city?
For sure, it's an extremely important part of everything we do at Union. We have Union Inspires sustainability and community work that we spend a lot of time on. We think it's very important. A club is really nothing more than a group of supporters that wanted their local area to be proud.
Jaroslav?
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are from a small town. Jablonec is inhabited by approximately 45,000 people. So our club is the very, very biggest, gathering point for, I would say, sports children around. And therefore, we are big part of the local community, also in cooperation with the local infrastructure, such as schools, hospitals, and so on. So, yeah, I would say that the answer is definitely yes.
Yeah, gentlemen, thank you. We have 5 minutes to conclude this panel. Do we have some question raised from the WhatsApp system? No, not all. Maybe a conclusion from each of you. Basketball model, you think that you need an evolution and you need to recover the power maybe and the governance of the system?
We need,
which is not an easy thing.
Honestly, we need this thing to stop. we need to go back to the integrated model with room for everyone, because it's killing basketball at the European level, and it's going nowhere. So I think that's a very harsh but true conclusion. So we've lived this for several years now, and we need this thing to stop.
Stuart, can you say that the first defender of the current system are the fans, the supporters, who guarantee the legitimacy of the current system of football model?
Well, yeah. I was at the Parliament yesterday and speaking to various people, and we just reiterate our support for the European sports model. We think it's essential. We know that there are some differences of opinion. To different people, it means different things. But the essential aspects of the European sports model of open access, of promotion and relegation, of financial solidarity and of the social aspect, competitive balance, etc. These are the things that we want to see supported and protected and within the current ecosystem. It doesn't mean that we agree with everything that UEFA say and do or that FIFA say and do. Of course, we're always in conversation and putting forward our point of view and proposals for change, but it's not like we've seen in other sports where there have been breakaway leagues because of a lack of governance on the part of the governing bodies in those sports. This is not the case, I don't think, in football. I think we have to protect the ecosystem as it is. It's not perfect. We've all heard, lots of people have said that today. There are things that we can do, and we should use the threat of the Super League and turn it into an opportunity to have these conversations going forward.
Thank you. Jaroslav, what dream can you have next match against Union Saint-Gilloise in Brussels?
Yes, yes, that is our very biggest dream for now.
Competition.
Yes. Yes, hopefully not the Super League.
Alex, thank you. Last word about this issue, and the Super League is not the future of the Belgian football and your club.
Yeah, I think Stuart said that well as well. That when we talk about UEFA, these quabbles are about various things. It's pretty rare in football that there's unanimous opinion, and on this there's unanimous opinion.
Dear panelists, thank you so much for your opinions. Joris, we respect the time schedule, I think, so we are great.
No.
We can welcome the president now.
Oh, excuse me. Why don't you wait a moment, Thomas? I had a last-minute question that came in
please.
that I think is a relevant question, specifically to the two representatives of clubs that are here on stage with us. It comes from Karina Gaete. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. From the European Parliament, an assistant at the European Parliament. The question is, if you could name 3 things that should be urgently addressed to improve the current model so your organization and its community can benefit, what is your, in Spain we have the Reyes Magos, I guess in other places Santa Claus, or in the Netherlands and in Belgium Sinterklaas. You know, what are your 3 wishes that you would put on your list in terms of improving the current model? What would you like to see change to help clubs of your size?
Alex, please.
Well, I mean, the first thing is that I still feel that the model is too biased at the top. So the teams in the Champions League and the teams in the big leagues now with the market pool get too much and it's not redistributed. That's kind of number one. Number two, look, we have a very big problem in European leagues at the moment where the same teams are winning the titles over and over again, and that is because the UEFA money goes directly to that club and is not redistributed among the other teams in that country. So, you know, you don't need me to name Bayern Munich, you don't need me to name these other that win relentlessly. The reason they win relentlessly is because the UEFA money has become so enormous at the very top end that the other teams in the league can't compete. And we all want competition. We all want different teams winning. We all want more excitement in that regard. I would say those are the 2 main ones. The third one I'd be coming off would be less important.
Thank you.
Well, I pretty much agree with Alex. What I wanted to say was almost the same thing, that probably, although the big clubs will continue to say that they should be receiving more because they are the ones who have the attraction, who bring the people. On the other hand, it is, well, football is still sports. It is, well, the matches between the small clubs and the big clubs that make it interesting. It's, for example, if we look now at the World Cup, everybody was surprised by what Morocco did. So I think that it's pretty much the same on the club level, that it's always a nice surprise to have a small club reach the top level, let's say. And this is why the solidarity redistribution should turn a little bit more in favor of the smaller clubs and not only having the big piece of cake for the few big ones. That's one thing, and also the accessibility, that there are not numerous clubs from the very biggest competitions, but also to make it more accessible for the smaller ones, as that would then also help with reducing the gap.
Thank you very much. I think those are very good comments. Thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you so much, Laurent, for moderating. Appreciate it. We're going to move on to the final part of our agenda. And I'll invite on stage Javier Tebas, the president of LaLiga, for some closing commentary and a reflection on what has been said today here on stage. Again, if you are interested after the address by Javier to ask questions, please send those via WhatsApp and we'll present them to Javier. Thank you very much. And if you need a headset, please, we'll bring it to you if you still need one in this room. And otherwise, online, you're hearing this in Spanish already with simultaneous translation. Thank you. Javier.
Sorry. Give me water. Buenos días.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having come here to this event, and thank you very much for those who are connected remotely. Lots of things have been said here this morning. Most of them are pretty on the point, and I think we should take note of them. And we've had a good debate this morning. But what I want to focus on are several things of what is going on at the moment, because in April 21, we all know what happened. We've spoken so much, and so much has been said about the closed model. But now, 18 months have gone by, things have happened, and messages are being sent out through this entire period of time. So I think it's very important to analyze what's going on, and also what they want us to actually believe. If we analyze the facts, and they talk about the first thing I talk about, they talk about the European sports model. And I'm going to talk specifically about, European sports includes the football model too, the competitive model and the financial model. And we have to be very clear about what it is, because they're trying to deceive us with, promotion, relegation, and also be careful about this sports merit. We have to be very clear about the different concepts. This morning, A22, which is Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus, we all know that, which is something we shouldn't forget. It is not a philanthropic company that's just been developed to try and improve European football. No, they are these three clubs. And what they're looking for is an objective, which maybe I'll go into more details later on. But what they said this morning, in European sports football, they should have principles in open competition, promotion, relegation, to guarantee the protection and sustainable development. Together, we think this is the future of the club football. And also, they've organized an event tomorrow to organize the principles of, of promotion and relegation. Well, that's what we're talking about, but it's not the same what they are defending and what we are all defending. You have to be very clear about what the differences are. And you have to be very clear about what the model is, the European football model, and the European sports model, and how it's been built up over the last 25 years, which means that we're a very flourishing industry. Obviously, we've all got our defects and our errors, and these are things that need to be corrected, but not in the respect of what this European Super League wants to correct along those lines. We have to remember, and now I'll talk about the model, because it hasn't changed. If someone knows fully well the people who are creating the Super League, what they are thinking about, well, it's the Spanish League. We know all about it. And that could be me as a president, because the highest representative of the ESL is Florentino Perez, who is the president of a Spanish club. And we've had lots of different conversations with Mr. Florentino Perez, and I know exactly what he thinks about football and how he would like football to be. And this has been happening for many years now, and nothing's changed. So this model is that the richest, or the ones with the most assets, govern football. And they distribute the money how they feel suitable. They don't want a third institution like UEFA or even maybe the Liga itself to establish the ways that they are going to distribute the money, because they think they generate more money and they should know how to distribute it. We should never forget. And there was a phrase that was said, as Florentino Perez said in December, said, give the maximum. We have come here to save football. And he said in December, Real Madrid has the historical view of saving football. But strangely enough, football in general, not just the UEFA, don't make a mistake, it's not something just based on UEFA. This is an attack on the European football medal, that one part is UEFA, another part of the national leagues, another part are the players, another part of the fans. It's a complete attack on European football model. And that's what they're doing. So we shouldn't think about the UEFA. No, no, no. We have to be very aware of this. So what is the European football model that we're all trying to defend? National league, domestic leagues, that should be strong. And on a competitive level, they need to have promotion and relegation, obviously in the first division and the second division. And Europe, the access to Europe is through the national leagues, but it's not a promotion and relegation model. Because if you have a model which is based on promotion and relegation, which is how the national leagues are based, then we would have a closed league, limited, always. So if there's 20 teams, well, 15 or 16 will almost always be the same teams. And this is what they're selling with this message that they gave out this morning. You know, for the last few months, I've been a spoiler saying, well, tomorrow, what are they going to present? What are they going to present tomorrow? Tomorrow, what they want to present is the model that was presented in the year 2019 between UEFA and the ECA, that are two categories with promotion and relegation, when the majority of the European clubs decided that that would never work. The clubs and the league said that would never work. And UEFA, with a good criteria, they also removed that idea. So when we're talking about sports merit, we're talking about the European football model that is based on domestic leagues, which are based on promotion and relegation. But European competition has to be open to all leagues, and there has to be an access through the competition system with different variables that it's always had. But they can't just build two leagues because they say, well, it's open. If we have a, one first league in Europe, we'll have a second division, and there could be 3 teams could be promoted. And they say, okay, well, now it's open. It's sports merit because you can be promoted, but that's not it. There will be 0.001% of being promoted. Don't forget that. This is the model that we have to defend, i.e. the current one. And I'm insisting on this concept because the champions and their European competitions and the access is through domestic leagues, and there are promotion and relegation in those, and the other one is being eliminated, because if you're not in the group classification, well, you go down. And so in that case, there's no promotion or relegation, not just because you're classified in the Champions League. You actually get a position for the next few years. It doesn't work like that. So we shouldn't fall into their trap. And the message that they gave out today from A22, which is the Super League, let's talk about an open league with promotion and relegation. What they're going to try and sell us is this model, but it isn't the European football model that we need to defend. Why? Because this model, and it's been very well explained, and the one that they want to impose is if we already have problems, which is the representative of the Belgian club said, where the distribution of the revenue from the champions go to certain clubs who then also compete in domestic leagues. And so we have a very big gap between those clubs and the other clubs. Well, with the model that they're presenting, it's going to be an even bigger gap. I think 16 clubs or maybe 3, are promoted or relegated, and they're playing in this first division. On the midterm, they will destroy the domestic leagues, as has been explained by 11 Sports here this morning. So we need to be very clear about what the European football model is. And it's very important that the European football model that they defend, we need to bear in mind that what they're looking for is just a change in the governance, so the big European clubs, the one who are the richest with more assets, should govern. I might agree that clubs, should have decision-making possibilities. We shouldn't worry about that. I've told UEFA that. And LaLiga is comprised of clubs. I'm the president and chosen by the 42 clubs in LaLiga. So governance has to strike a balance. We need to have a balance between the big, the medium-sized, and small clubs. But they don't want this balance. They don't want it to continue like that. All their declarations, they say we're the ones that generate the most money, we have the most interesting clubs, so we have to be decision makers. So that is the same extreme that in April 2021, when the president of Real Madrid said, we've come along to save you. We'll sell the broadcasting rights more and we're bigger, and then we will distribute the money as we feel fit. So, because we all got really worried, and that is the way they still think. They haven't changed their mindset. We see this every single day in Spain. We know exactly what they think. Now, as they realize that they made a mistake, they didn't do it bad, especially the communication. So now there's these little sheep behind them, which is called A22, that have now come on the scene. And it seems as if it's a lot of nuns that come out of the conference saying, no, we're the good people, and they've come along to explain how excellent they are. So please don't be deceived by them. Don't fall into their trap, because it's not true. And sometimes they're selling, models based on sports merit, but they're not actually sports merit programs, which happened in the year 2019. So let's concentrate on one question. And this is not something that we are stating against the UEFA, because I think if the UEFA, was selfish, they'd say, I've got my championships, I have my competitions, I can come to an agree with these big clubs, and I'll continue with the others. I'll still give money to different competitions and federations, and they could say it, but thank God they haven't said it, because this project, this model is an attack especially on the domestic and national leagues. They say it isn't, because they know that, we would even be more against it. The defense of certain leagues to the European football model is weak. It's weak. We have to be clearer, because the Superleague will destroy national leagues. As I've already explained, the gap between the big and the small would be even greater. Real Madrid, Barcelona will be the top 2, and they would always be in the Super League. We've done the financial calculation, 300 million extra euros, and all the other clubs in the Spanish league would lose money. Their income or revenue would go down by 50%. And I've already explained these, and these are these communicating vessels, broadcasting rights, for example. This has already been well explained, the ULEB, and it's just not the big clubs. So if we get less broadcasting rights, in 5 years' time, these national leagues will be destroyed. And these are the effects of the Super League. So we really have to know what the effects would be. And so it's an attack on the leagues, it's an attack on the clubs, and it's an attack on the players. So we really have to think that European football has over 1,550 professional clubs. We're not talking about 20 or 15 or 200 clubs, which are members of the ECA. No, we have over 1,500 clubs in Europe. There are over 50,000 professional footballers. Some earn a lot of money, some don't, some earn very little. But we have 50 million families who live off football, and that is dangerous. So it doesn't matter what size the league is, and one earns 2,000 euros, 1,000 euros, or 10 million euros. That endangers the ecosystem, and we have to really think about this correctly. So, LaLiga has really studied this well, because KPMG produced a report. What they want out of this 25 billion that football generates in Europe, they want to distribute the majority for them, but now they're saying we have to sit down, we have to talk, we have to negotiate. Because in the year 2021, they came off with their project. They weren't prepared to negotiate, and when they launched their initial project. But as it didn't go too well, now they want to sit around the table and negotiate. No, they're still in the system. They continue with the system, and if something that has to be organized within the system, it should be led by UEFA. I wanted to finish this morning making a call to everyone. I heard the Polish member of parliament say, what's going to happen on the 15th of March? It seems that the 15th of March, it's an end to the debate related to European football. So depending, what the court says, well, it's going to be the end. In my opinion, and I hope that the ruling of the European Court of Justice will go along a line which may even improve what the General Attorney has already said in his preliminary ruling. But what's going to happen the next day, regardless of the ruling, if, depending on the opinion, but independent of that, we need to demand our European legislators to the European Commission that everything they've said in their declarations, and he said that to defend European football model, they need to transcribe that in directives of the European Union. And so these need to be European Union regulations to protect European football. We can't just continue the hundreds, because there's hundreds of families that live off this industry, and hundreds of thousands of fans live the sport with passion, and they can't worry about whether it's all against Article 101 or 102. We can't worry about these articles. And the same way as there have been directives to regulate within European organ different markets, the betting market, for example, copyright, television without boundaries. So we need to regulate the European sports model, because personally, I love all these declarations. I'm very grateful for them. But I'm getting a little bit tired. Less declarations and more activity, more things can be done. So we've got to do things after the 15th of March, regardless of the ruling, because this risk is going to continue. It will continue, and as has been said here this morning, for many, many years, the big European clubs have been putting pressure on UEFA, which is the institution that should maintain the competitive balance within Europe. They've been pressuring the UEFA and saying, if you don't give me more, I'm going to leave. And it happened in 2016, and I experienced that 2 weeks earlier before Ceferin took up his position as the president of UEFA, when Platini left. In monarchy, they agreed on a champions model with this distribution of money very quickly, because there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of pressure on the people who were in UEFA at that time. So it's very necessary to have a directive. The European Union needs to pronounce on this, and they need to regulate the European football model, the European sports model. We've heard about Baloncesto. Basketball can't continue this because they've just killed it off. Sometimes the president of the club association in Spain gets cross with me when I say things like that, but they've really ruined it, and it's dying off slowly. And at the end, these national teams will also reduce in size just due to all this selfishness. Let's not build up football models or sports models based on 20 clubs, 200 players, because this is happening in football in different places, because people are just thinking on that. Let's have a football model. Let's maintain the one we have. Let's defend it, thinking on 1,550 professional clubs and hundreds of thousands of non-professional ones, 50,000 families. Let's defend and build up this model. And it should be done by the European Union based on regulations, directives, which defend us for the future, because, you know, if not, the 15th of March will just be yet another phase in this battle. Well, that's all I wanted to say, and thank you all very much for coming here today.
Muchas gracias, Javier. Propongo que...
Thank you very much, Javier. Let's sit down now, because we do have a few questions for you from the media, the people here and people who are connected remotely. You have been very clear about talking to football for everyone, not just for the elite. And I have certain questions about this. For example, there's a journalist from Bulgaria, Lian Kuchit, has a question. He said, what recommendations do you have for the smaller leagues, for the modest leagues, to achieve growth of their product, to be more successful in the international market too? Well, we've talked a lot about this. I think that the fan representative said that there's a very basic initial thing to be able to grow. It is the financial sustainability of your competition. Your domestic league is very, very important, because otherwise people just want more and more money just to cover your losses, and you're never satisfied. And this is what is happening in a lot, or some of the large European leagues. If your club is always losing money, you put your hand up and say, I want more money, I want more money from sponsors, from the TV or whatever. And what does this mean? It means that things like the Superleague appear on the scene because your losses are so great that you want more money. It doesn't matter if you take it from your next door neighbor or from whoever. So we need to have to try that European football is sustainable, and that has to be based on the national leagues and done by the national leagues. And secondly, once sustainability exists, and the UEFA has made steps forwards for the competition, for the clubs who are competing in that, but not just for the clubs who are competing in UEFA, but for all clubs who are competing in all national leagues. So we have to talk about this redistribution of the money. You know, the national leagues, the big leagues. I'm not worried about sitting around a table and talk about redistributing the revenues. No problems whatsoever, because, you know, each league has its own realities, but we know we have to sit down and talk about these things. But we need to start with financial sustainability, because otherwise all this extra income will be to cover our losses. So we need to have a football that is economically sustainable. That is the first stage. This happened in Spain 10 years ago. Our league lost 500 million euros per season. It was totally impossible. So if we got more revenues, what do? We paid off our debts, but we then continued to lose more. So we have a model for financial control. The clubs no longer lose money. I'm talking general terms, of course. And now we are sustainable. So now you can talk about more revenue, more distribution, more balanced distribution. You can talk about lots of other things, because if you don't, all of us are in the football world. I have owned a football club for many years. At the end of the day, everything they give you is to try and buy new players to see if you can be promoted and, you know, cover a few of your losses. So talking about that, there's a journalist who is asking about the distribution money at LaLiga, and it seems that the big clubs get more money than the others. And there's a distribution model for the revenues that has enormous differences. I don't know what you think about that. Well, hang on, in Spain, the system, what is this what I've asked the European Union to do? We didn't come to an agree with the centralized sale and the distribution of the broadcasting money in 2012 and 30. So we said to the government in Spain, the legislator, we need a law which establishes that the centralized sales of audiovisual rights, and then once we've got that, we can then redistribute the money. That happened in Italy too. You know, we weren't inventing everything. So we've done a redistribution, and we did our homework, and it's done in a balanced manner. It might be not 100% fair, but it's always very difficult for everything to be perfectly fair. But in the redistribution of our broadcasting rights, there's not such a big difference in the first division between Real Madrid and the one at the bottom of the league. But I don't think there's going to be more than 3.5% difference. But it's you know, the clubs at the beginning have bigger structures, more expenses, so we can't obviously make them lose competitiveness. But this 3.5% is what we have difference. But the Spanish government, before they approved this law, I think the difference between 1 and 3, and now it's 1 and 3.5. But so in 2.5 in the Premier League and the Big 6, and when we talk about the Big 7, when we talk about Tottenham, that don't like this system for distribution, because what they wanted to have the same amount of money as all the others. But I don't think there's such a big difference, as you said. And here I would like to make the most of talking about what's been mentioned this morning, talking about competitiveness. And when we talk about competitiveness, we can't say we don't want the same club to always be the champion of the league. But I think this is an error. The Bayern Munich can always win the Bundesliga. But what we shouldn't have is a winner who wins by a big number of points. For me, that's key. For example, the Spanish league, which has 20 clubs, if the people who wins the league wins it with less than 90 points, it means that there's going to be other clubs who are really going to fight for the championship, and the results are not predictable. Because, you know, a lot of points have been lost all over the different stadiums in Spain because they're really fighting to win the championship. We don't want predictable matches. This is the key to leagues. And also, you know, we don't only have a league winner, because for a lot of clubs to be relegated, so for a lot of the clubs, the fact that they're not relegated, it means they are still winning because they're staying in the top division. So this is important for competitiveness. And it's not a fact that we don't want the same club to win the leagues, because we have other titles too. There's a lot of other silverware to be born. But what we don't want them is to win by a large number of points. It's good for because obviously a lot of clubs have the option to compete in Europe. But as we say in Spain, you know, if we changed you know, the division or the redistribution of television rights, and we gave more to the people who are at the bottom of the league rather than to the ones at the top, well, so it means the situation would change completely. A lot's been talked about the distribution of the money, giving it to the big clubs. There's a question here from Juan from the agreement between the ECA and UEFA and the joint venture they have. What do you think about the future of the distribution of the money from European competitions? Well, first of all, agreement. I haven't actually gone into detail about this. I haven't looked at the small print. They have an agreement because this agreement between the ECA and the UEFA, well, the principles that the clubs are in the decision-making bodies for commercial issues and TV things. That's good. In my opinion, I think that's very good. But what's the bad thing about it? It's the governance rules of the ECA are not correct. They do not represent European clubs. Why? Because all you know, the ECA and how it works, you have subdivision 1, subdivision 2, others don't have voting rights. At the end of the day, who dominates the ECA are the big clubs. There's no balance that there should be in the decision-making bodies between the big clubs who need to be there, but also you need to have the medium-sized clubs there, and even the small-sized clubs need to be in these decision-making bodies. What happens in the Spanish league? We have these different entities, like for example, we have the big, small, and medium clubs participating in our different bodies related, for example, to broadcasting rights. But if it's not like this, the decisions made are not correct. Then when you're talking about the distribution system, I think, and I'm going to go back to what I said at the very beginning, if we work more, the national leagues work more on financial sustainability, then we could maybe change the distribution. And the Liga is prepared to sit down and say, well, what do we need to do? Do we have to put up more money, or how much? We're prepared to change things. But what we're not prepared to do, and I'm talking about, representing our league, that we give more money to a competition where everyone's losing money, and so they're not going to be able to be financially economical. To finance losses, that is not the responsibility of the UEFA nor of the big leagues. We exist to ensure that football is sustainable in Europe. And that's why we need to have the basis to make them sustainable. And that is when, after that, you can see how we can rebalance the European system, the European financial system. But this doesn't mean that a small country is going to give them, the same amount of money as Real Madrid, because obviously we need to respect the history of football and the European football model. But what you can't maybe have these big differences and how difficult it is to maintain the players that you think in your academies and your clubs. So we have to work to avoid these young players leaving the academy at such an age. We have to work on this with financial sustainability, and as in Holland, they may leave at 22, but now they're going to leave at 18. And so if they leave at 22, it means that that team will be more competitive for a longer period of time. We need to work on that. So it's money and regulations. A question from Antonio Ramiro from the European Parliament on the Premier League. People think that the Premier is becoming a very powerful league in Europe, and so it could almost be called the Superleague in itself. What's your opinion of Premier League? Well, that is what Aid by 22 has been saying. Well, yes, because we know that the Premier League model, the clubs in the Premier League are not going to be part of the project at the moment. They sell the fact that the Premier in itself is a European Super League, and so they need to have a project in Europe so that they can compete against the Super League. Well, first of all, the Premier League. They have more commercial revenue. Well, the other leagues will have to fight to try and have better commercial revenues. I don't want to take money away from the Premier. Give me $1 billion a year because I want to do better. No, I've got to go to the market, and I've got to fight to make sure that my broadcasting rights are worth more and do other things. What I'm worried about is the Premier, and I've been worried for many years now. But now it's converted into competition that has losses all the year. All clubs owe money. There is no sustainability in the Premier League. And the person from Bulgaria was asking about that. The Premier League is not a financially sustainable model. They're financed by the owners, but with enormous amounts of money. And that is distorting the market. This distorts the market. They get more revenues? Okay. But apart from the fact you get more revenue, you lose money. And you're injecting, $1.5 billion every year. What does it mean? It means, you're not sustainable at all because of European football, the champions, and if other competitions know how to do things pretty well. When you need financial sustainability, and we can compete with the Premier without any problem at all. I'm not worried about the fact that in the 15th position of the first division, the Premier signs up a Spanish player. No, I'm worried about the fact if they sign him up when they're making losses, because we don't allow our clubs to sign up players when they're making losses. So that doesn't mean that there's good competition in the market. In this summer transfer window, the Premier has a difference between the players that they have bought and the ones they've sold of 1,200 million. And the Bundesliga plus 50, and us less 50. And we can't have all this situation. And they are 1.8 times bigger than LaLiga. So the difference should have been 100 million up or down, not almost $1 billion, because they inject money in to pay off their losses. In Europe, the only two leagues that are sustainable economically is the Bundesliga and La Liga. So what we need to do is not fight saying that they're the Premier League and that the Premier League is a Super League. No, we need to fight so that the financial sustainability is also applied to the Premier League. Last question from Andres. How do you value the activism of the national delegations? For example, the Super League. Do you think there's a lot of people being the activists against the ESL. Well, I think in general, in European institutions, well, what I would prefer to be seen, is not really what I like, because you know me, I'm really get excited about things and I'm very active. I think we need a lot more activism, because I really think this is a big danger that we have ahead of us. The Superliga. It's not just a one-off problem on the 15th of March. No, this started in the 2008 with G8, and it will continue after the 15th of March, despite whatever happens in the ruling. So I said the principles that we need to defend in the European football model. The champions, UEFA. Obviously, they've got changes in governance that they will have to have, and in fact, they're taking place. But the model and the domestic leagues with their promotion and regulation, and then we have the group phases, and we have all the different rounds, the knockout phases. That's what's at danger. So we have to be very clear, and I say this a lot. And people say, you're very harsh in the way you talk out about things. But I say, when somebody comes and wants to steal something at my home at night, and I'm looking at you, I'll be rushing out and I'll be bashing you with whatever I find, with a walking stick or whatever. Well, that's what we need to do now. They want to steal from us at our own leagues with our money. We have to be polite. Well, yes. But to be quiet and say nothing, and to be politically correct, no way, because they are stealing from us. This is what we need to say so people really understand it. These are these communicating vessels. I've already talked about this. So the money will go from domestic leagues into the Super League, and that's the way it's going to be happening. So we've got to be very strict, and we've got to be very clear. We shouldn't be afraid of defending things. It's not a problem. Because if it, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if the Super League came off. So you all have to say what you think and actually do things. Well, thank you very much, Javier, as always. Well, thank you all very much for being here today, and all those who are connected online. Have a great afternoon, and we're just offering something to eat outside.
Here in the room, outside of this room, please enjoy. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being with us. It was a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.